Well, it's time for us to get into the conversation, and that is family matters. And we're handling the topic on affordable housing. But obviously, again, looking at our top stories from yesterday as well as today, really majoring on environment conservation and some of the dangers that have come with it. Having come from a county perhaps or from areas where there are rivers and you see the drying, it's quite a sad story, a totally sad story to narrate. But tonight, let's just talk about affordable housing. We'll talk about the conservation of environment on another day, though it is a sad story that we are in a situation where rivers are drying up and we're still seated pretty. We hope the ban on logging can remain for years, not just 3 months. Anyway, I have a panel fully constituted in studio. I'll start with Samuel Maina, who is the chairperson. Urithi, thank you very much, Chair, for joining us tonight. And you also have Ruth Odero, who is from Habitat for Humanity. It's an NGO dealing with issues of affordable housing. And then you have Johnson Denge, the manager, Regional Markets, Sit and Investments. It's a company we engage mostly when we're having these conversations. But then the idea today is affordable housing and looking at it in terms of how the government wants to see it. But then you would understand from the challenges that range, it's not just a simple conversation you can have and gloss over it. So I want us to get into the innate details of affordable housing. I'll start with you, Chairman. Affordable. What is affordable?
Thank you very much, and I want to greet the viewers.
Yes.
Affordable is a term we must demystify. We are living in a country with a population of about 44 million people. Mm-hmm. And in this sector of the formerly employed people, only 2.89% earn an income above 100,000. 2.89?
Yes. That's very sad.
That tells you that when you talk of affordable, we can only categorize that into 3 tiers. Tier 1, we have what we call the low income, middle, and upper. Under the low, we have low, middle, upper low. In the middle, we have low middle, middle, and upper middle. And of course, when you go to upper class, there's another story for another day. When we talk of affordability, therefore, we must capture the low income segment of the economy. These are people who earn anything below 50,000 per month. And you see, majority of, especially those in the formal sector, from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, most of them are within that range of earning a salary between 30 and 50. Majority are way below 30. And when I say a person earns 30,000, I also want to bring in the aspect of that is the gross salary or the net salary. Yeah. There are other overheads. So this is a person with disposable income of 10,000 to 15,000. So if we want to sincerely capture that market, capture that need, we must go to the very, very low income earning segment and make sure that whatever people call affordable here actually is way below affordability.
All right. Ruth, what cadre of people do you target in your NGO? As well as, I know you're working in conjunction with the local bank, but what cadre of people do you target when you talk about affordable housing?
Well, for Habitat for Humanity, we target the bottom of the pyramid, and these are people who earn $5 to $10 a day. So what he's talked about is very pertinent because we are looking at people earn like 30,000 to 50,000 a month, and there must be people who earn some form of income. Yeah.
When you look at the conversations that we have in Kenya, because you've dealt with these things, and whenever we refer to affordable housing, do you think we have these people that they talk about, the ones earning, $5 to $10? You said that? 5 to 100?
30,000 to 50,000.
30,000 to 50,000.
A month, yeah.
Do you think in our conversations about affordable housing, we ever have these people in mind?
Yes, and I think they've captured the definition well. Universally affordable housing, they say a unit a housing that can be afforded by a median income through an acceptable, either national affordable index or a local government affordable index. That's what is categorized. And if you look at the Kenya, looking at the cadres of earning, going back to what he was talking about in formal income by Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. These are people who have a household income of around 30 to 50, given that assuming two adults in a household are working, then their combined income comes to about 30 to 50,000, and meaning that they are able to afford a house of something around 10,000, assuming a universal spending of about 30% on rental. So they've actually captured, and in our affordable housing discussions in the country, we should be able to capture this. I think what government is
Which
doing
means
is
we have not captured.
we should be able to capture
All right. And we'll try and drive some sense even into the people in that sector. But why I was talking about this is there were high-rise apartments in Langata, particularly in the area around Kibera, that were being built for low-income earners, or it was called affordable housing. Today, the people occupying those houses, I'm not sure, are low-income earners.
Yes, I think it boils down to what we had alluded to from the onset, that the low are the people that wanted to bring to the upper low. And what happened is that you take this person who pays a rent below 1,000 to a house that they are supposed to pay 15,000 or thereabout. Most likely they are going to rent it than occupy it, because there are other things that informs the rent. The rent should be at least a third of your income. So when you take me to a house that I'm supposed to spend 15,000 equivalent, and my earnings are below, way below, what will happen is that I'll see that as another source of income. So if we want to help these people, we must go to where they are at their level, not giving them the houses that they want, but the houses that they need. What are the houses that they need? At the low end of the pyramid, where the, you know, when you talk of the housing, you are talking of where the base is very wide. These are people that need houses below 1 million, 500,000, 1 million, and they pay over a period of 10 years to 15 years.
They need to buy a house of 1 million.
1 million or below. That is when it will be sensible to them.
But what kind of a house would that be?
It will be a good house if the government will come in place and bring the necessary mitigations that brings down the cost of a house, namely the cost of land, and then it utilize what we call vertical space. Because when land is very expensive, in a quarter plot of land, you can fit in so many houses because the vertical height is not limited.
That means erecting skyscrapers?
Yes, for them. But also, that is the first component. Land, the cost of land.
Yes.
The other thing is provision of the social amenities. Because another component of why houses are very expensive is because when you start doing roads, you start doing the infrastructure as we know them, water, reticulation, electricity, and all that. It boils down to the same thing. It adds up on the cost of the land. So if the government can provide those things, the social infrastructure, and provide land, and also bring down the cost of material by giving them incentives and tax reliefs, and also making it affordable to construct a house by giving, you know, the provisions in our counties, county government, making the permits, the approvals, and everything very, very swift. That can be realized. Because you see, the cost of the house per se may not be very high, but these other extras, or like when you want to import material to do those houses, today the government only considers those who are doing at least 400 houses per year. How many people have that capacity?
And that conversation it's a conversation we'll still be having as the program progresses, because it's also a very interesting conversation in terms of the relief that was provided to these particular individuals. But of course, you can get in touch with us and join in this conversation. The SMS line is 22162. 22162 is our SMS line. On Twitter at KBC Channel 1, at JKuria, the hashtag is Family Matters. Do get in touch with us and tell us what your views really are. But obviously, coming back to the same matter, because Ruth, we're talking about an environment that is degraded. And I'm wondering from where I'm sitting, what kind of a house do we have in mind? Is it a permanent house? And if we do, what are the risks of filling land, you know, with buildings as opposed to, you know, keeping the environment green?
Yeah, I like what he's saying,
Yes.
but He's talking from the perspective of urban areas. And you know as well as I do that poverty in Kenya has a rural face. So we have like 60 to 75% of urban areas. And you know as well as I do that poverty in Kenya has a rural face. So we have like 60 to 75% of our people stay in the rural areas, and they need good houses, they need decent houses, they need affordable houses. So for me, affordability is a function of need, it's a function of preference, it's a function of capacity. We are saying that maybe in the next 50 years, many areas will be urbanized, so we need to think of rental houses, houses in peri-urban areas, houses in urban areas. But what about the rural areas? Yeah, what happens in the rural areas? So at Habitat for Humanity International, we think of not just urban housing. We think of rental, but we think more of residential houses for the people at the bottom of the pyramid. And we are looking at their capacity, we are looking at their preferences, we are looking at their need, because the need is based on a form of a decent housing. Yeah, and we are looking at their capacity also, if you earn.
Perhaps go into details on that matter, so that we are able to break it down for people. You're talking about capacity and need and issues like that. For example, let's say you go to the interiors of where? Shimalavandu in Kakamega County. So what will you be assessing? You meet an individual. How do you determine their capacity? How do you determine their need? And what kind of house do you come up with after that?
When you go to Shimalavandu in Kakamega, for example, you talk to the person. You go to the person. You talk to them. You look at the area. You look at the materials in the area. You look at their capacity. What is their income level? Are they farming? Are they small business people? And what is their need? Because a house, for example, in Saccos may not be the same as a house in Shimalavandu. If you go to Western, for example, there is a lot of natural materials that they use for houses. If you go to Saccos, for example, they would be like bricks, they would be like stones. So we are looking at affordability in terms of what materials do they have in those areas? What is their capacity? How can you support them? How can you lift them in such a way that, using their materials, using their preferences, and preference is in what materials do they want to use? For example, you can say, okay, let's make affordability in terms, let's use interlocking bricks. But interlocking bricks will be more expensive than a burnt brick, for example, in Gambogi, in Western Province. So what is the preference for that person? Would he prefer to use interlocking bricks, or would he prefer to use, the ordinary burnt bricks? Would he prefer to use just earth? So we look at affordability in terms of capacity. What is his capacity to pay for a loan, for example? Can he afford a loan of 500,000? Can he afford a loan of 200,000? What is his preference in terms of materials? And what is the basic need? Because we are looking at, a general decent house for the people at the bottom of the pyramid. So for us, affordability is not just in somebody who can get a mortgage, is where you are at that point. How can we support you to improve your house or build your house incrementally?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Describing the problem in terms of what we're looking at as the government, tries to measure on affordable housing, what gaps do we have, or what deficit are we looking at when we talk about housing and affordable housing for that matter?
Generally, statistics shows that especially urban housing, not going to specifically rural areas. In urban housing, we are looking at a deficit of about 2 million units.
2 million?
Yeah, most of these being in the required, the affordable, which is required for the low pyramid of the population. We are looking at this increasing. Kenya urbanization is growing at around 4.4%, according to World Bank, meaning about 500,000 people get urbanized every year. And these people require houses. If you look at if UN Agenda around what is adequate housing.
Yeah.
If you follow that Agenda Declaration 1996, it talks about a housing that has enough space, a housing that has proper security, security of tenure. Then using the same, you realize over around 60% of urban dwellers.
You talked about security and issues like that because I'm wondering, how achievable? Okay, go ahead.
You realize that around 60% of the urbanized Kenyans are basically living in informal settlement.
Yeah.
So the gap is there. In most cases, for us to be able to achieve serving this type of population we're looking at, then government has to play a part, especially in enabling. We've seen a lot of provision in terms of policy, in terms of legislation, trying to move to this, including even our Kenya strategy, Vision 2030, still talks about affordable housing. So I think the direction that is coming now, where government is promising to do a million housing and maybe scale this, is in the right direction.
It's a welcome move.
Yes.
And the pictures will ask Sarah to pull up for me on the screen as we continue, talking about affordable housing, so that we can continue, seeing the same. But obviously, some of the houses you will see are dream houses, what people who are earning, a lot of money would want to have. But let me come to you, Chairman, because you're dealing with some of these things and, some of these houses that you're likely to see them. When you talk about affordable housing, from where you sit, particularly at Urithi, what do you look at?
We look at those levels of the economy and incomes. We look at something that one can afford to pay. And by using the necessary interventions, we are able to bring down costs. Like our approach as already, we use what we call building together. We acquire together. Yeah. And that helps us in solving some of the problems that make the cost of houses very high. What we do, first of all, we are able to establish, identify land, bring down the cost of where the house will be sitting. Number two, we do gated community concepts, where we bring people together and make sure that the issues of security and shared amenities are mitigated upon. One of the challenges you see, and that is one challenge the government has in trying to develop rural areas, is that for you to reticulate water or electricity, you have very few people, in a space of land. But when you concentrate all those people, and in other countries, especially if you go to the Middle East and others, people are concentrated within a very, specific area, thereby making sure that most of the resources are shared. The infrastructure is equally well distributed. But when we come to our country, and especially in the rural setup, even doing a road to maybe meet the demands of a few becomes a very big challenge. Now, when we come to the houses that we try to construct to really, we go to the low level. Under owner room, we have houses that are below 1 million. Under GEM concept, we have houses that are below 2 million. And under Nyumba Mia concept, we have houses below 5 million. And anything above that is now outside our low-cost houses. And what we are looking at is something that you can afford to pay over a period of 3 years or so through the Sacco. And our pledge to the government is to enable, especially Saccos and cooperative societies, by giving them, finances that they can use as a revolving fund to finance the end consumer. And thereby, in a Sacco, you can only pay for, say, 3 years or
this house that is, sorry to cut you short, this is a house that is under 1 million. What does it have?
That's a bed sitter.
Peke yake.
Yeah. And this, you are moving, yes, it's laughable, but you see, critically, you are
Kakola
moving.
Space.
Yes, yeah, a 15 by 11 house is affordable.
You can kick yourself around as you
for
look
a startup.
Yeah.
You see, what happens in the Western world, for example, people start from where they are. When you are starting your life, you start from a single room. And when you get a family, you now move, you expand. And even their houses, they are fabricated. You increase the size of the house as your family increases. Yes. And when you grow old, you can sell some section of it by making it smaller. But in our country, what happens is that you have that dream house of 6 rooms, 7 rooms, while you need to use only 1.
Yeah.
So you invest a lot of money in a house that you don't need. So the issue is, how do you reach this affordability? And that is good for a certain level cadre of people who can afford, because they also use these houses as security and, of course, for status and prestige.
Yeah.
But for these low costs, there are two things we must demystify. We must demystify cheap and low cost. What is cheap and what is affordable? Affordable does not mean cheap. Affordable means what you can afford, what you can attain. But cheap means something that you can bring down the cost. So you can make something that was a bit expensive affordable by lowering down the cost, by doing other things that make the cost of a house very, very low. So in our concept of building together, we negotiate for material, we negotiate for labor, we negotiate for these other social amenities, and the land, we are able to bring down the cost of these houses. But still we are not there, because there are other external factors to consider, and that is where we sometimes ask the government to come in and help us build our case. If the government would go through the Saccos, for example, and I'm saying the Saccos because Saccos are in every country, every county in the country. And Saccos have contacts with the consumers, who are the members. And Saccos knows how to follow the person to pay. So the burden of empowerment of these people is shifted from the Sacco, from the government to the Sacco, because the government cannot afford to build houses for people. But they can afford to give Sacco a revolving fund that they will be, giving out, and they collect the money.
So you want the government to channel money to
Saccos? Through the Saccos.
Okay.
Because Saccos are very, very pivotal in trying to meet this demand.
Absolutely. And we'll also talk about that, because, again, the place of banks and Saccos right now, it looks like Saccos are almost overtaking banks at some point. And we'll have that conversation. But for now, Ruth, from where I'm sitting, and for the purposes of the viewer, and this is an invitation to draw parallels between mortgages and, going for perhaps your model of affordable housing. Why would I go for your model and not for a mortgage?
Well, if you look at Nairobi, for example, look at an area like Ibidandora, Lakisama, we are now talking about urban.
Yes.
And we are talking about somebody like you maybe earn already in the range of maybe 100,000+ shillings.
You make my village very excited.
Yeah. So you already have the income. How long does it take you to buy maybe land? You have to save, for example, maybe for 3 years to buy that land. And then you have to borrow. Maybe you borrow another 1 million shillings, do the foundation. Maybe another 3 years, borrow another 1 million shillings, do the walls, plus maybe, the roof. So everybody is building, incrementally. So if you look at all these areas, all these new development areas, people are building incrementally, right? Many people, even us, we are building incrementally. Very few people can afford the mortgages. Yeah? So we are saying that even with an income of 100,000+, why don't we establish a product with the banks or the Saccos that can enable you take your product and build incrementally, but not incrementally in such a way that you have 6 rooms all going up at the same time, but incrementally in such a way that you can finish certain parts, live there, stop paying rent, and then continue with your building. So we are saying that our model is not just a model where you build incrementally the whole house at once, you borrow, build incrementally in such a way, build 2 rooms or 3 rooms, continue staying there as you build other rooms.
All right.
Yeah,
there's a point the chairman was making in terms of channeling money, to Saccos to aid this, entire thing about affordable housing. And looking at banks and Saccos, where would you place, banks or Saccos in terms of the probability or the reality of achieving this agenda on affordable housing? Would you rather go through Saccos or through banks?
I think I'll agree with him on going through Saccos. If you look at the mantrams or everything, the procedure that goes through the banks, it's a bit tedious. Just another thing will be, currently, mortgages are mainly issued by banks, but we have only about 24,000 mortgages in Kenya. So they've actually not been able to to achieve this, partly because of the appetite in lending to mortgages, the high cost of interest. A typical house of what is talking about, a 5 million house on a mortgage, with the current rates, you'll have to pay about 85 to 90,000 per month for the next 10 years or a 15-year mortgage. Now, that house that has, perhaps you are not living in, even if you are to supplement with 85 to 90,000 per month for the next 10 years or a 15-year mortgage. Now, that house that has, perhaps you are not living in, even if you are to supplement with rent with the type of earnings we are talking about, then you see it's unaffordable. So in a Sacco, because of that guarantee and follow-up, especially on collection, then I'll agree with him to say that perhaps it would be a good
banks should give more, the government should give more concentration
to Saccos. The last World Bank report also alluded to the same, where empowering Saccos. If you look at the government incentive, around 400,000 units also had Saccos included. So I think it's the right direction to try and get into having Saccos assist in
absolutely. I think this conversation is very much more of an eye-opener, because at the end of this conversation, people now must know where to fix their eyes in terms of owning that dream house or being in one. And particularly, Chairman says affordable. It's not about cheap. But then, Chair, I want to know, because the mortgage, the risk of mortgage and why people have been running away from mortgage is the fear that at one point, if I'm not able to pay up, this guys come and auction my house and stuff like that. And you know the drama is not very pleasant. So the question would be, what if at some point, through your scheme, I'm unable to raise the money, maybe according to the time that I'm supposed to pay? What do you do?
Ours is very simple. Let's do it together. Save some money, save a third, we give you triple. Let's also customize the house as per your need. Sometimes we also give them free advice by telling you that you don't need that big house. You may just need 2 bedrooms. You may just need, a sizable area of a house that may not require you to overburden yourself with other obligation. But more importantly is rent to own. How do you convert this income earner in terms of salary who rent out a house and become an owner? So you own towards, you rent, whatever you are using to rent is converted into ownership. Now, why the banks are not able to do that is because banks will not be interested in a concept. Banks are interested in
a rush to recover their money.
Yes, and they want a complete house. So in that case, for them to mortgage or to give you a mortgage, they require to see a house. But who would have done this house is a developer who might have also been financed by the same bank, and the same bank will also require you to borrow money to own, and they are left with collection of the money. So this house is financed at 2 levels, at the construction level and also at the purchase level, the retail level, because for Wanjiko to own this house, you go to the bank again. The developer who built this house went to the bank to develop so that the bank can come in. So to the bank, that is business. And we are not saying that is bad. We are saying it can only meet a certain need of the economy. But the majority, the pyramid, where the pyramid is wide, it is not lucrative because, like the houses we do at Uridi, a 3-bedroom house, self-contained, at between 3 to 5 million shillings. There's no money, there's no profit margin there in that house. And even if it's there, it's very minimal. So there's no business in that for an investor. It is not lucrative. But for the Sacco, because the bottom line is to meet the demands of the members, which is providing affordability in housing, provision of affordable houses and land, it means that the Sacco or the cooperative will not be very keen to make margin. But any investor will be very keen, and the percentage in the industry is 30%, at least 30% for you to be in business. That's why people go to the middle and upper echelon of the economy. And in that segment, you build a house and you make a margin of 5 million. But me, in my case, the whole house will cost 5 million, including, or 3 million, including the cost of the land and all those other factors.
Right.
So that is why it still boils down to our first, concern that if the government would empower institutions, if the government would empower Saccos and cooperative society to deliver this dream, it will become very, very, achievable. And the other thing is the geographical spread of the cooperatives and the Sacco. They are national. Every region you go, there's a Sacco.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
We are also coming up with a model of bringing all Saccos together. Instead of a Sacco now doing 2 houses alone, we can bring different Saccos and we do a concept together. And every chairman, every chairperson of the Sacco will manage their people. And we do it together. Instead of really doing 100 houses, what if we bring 100 Saccos to do a concept along Vika Road? We do another one in Kitale. Because like where I sit, I have projects in more than 14 counties. I'm doing small and medium concept. But if we had Saccos coming together in those counties, why do I need to reinvent the wheel? I'll go to the Saccos around, we come together not as competitors. I'm trying to say that there's no competition in this industry. With that very, very huge deficit of at least 200,000 units per year, which has accumulated to over 2 million over time. And the country is only able to absorb 50, everybody in the construction industry only does 50,000 units per year. So there's always a shortfall of about 150 houses. So when we really does 100 houses per month, that is a drop in the ocean. But all the Saccos could, Sacco A will do 2 houses, the other one will do 10 houses, the other one 300 houses. Even this incentive of the government of 400 housing units per year can be partaken by all those if they come together.
Absolutely.
And the education that should come even from the Ministry of the Cooperative is that we are not competitors, we are complementers. And if there could be such a structure where people be brought together under that thinking, you see that affordability will be there.
Maybe perhaps what we also need is a mental shift from the chairman of these Saccos, because it's only you that, perhaps can be able to see it that way. The rest want to view each other as competitors. But perhaps I agree, obviously, there needs to be a framework on which all of you can be able to engage and deal with this project. But coming back to you, looking at the government's perspective in terms of pushing the affordable housing agenda is to remove the mushrooming of, informal settlements. Do you think can be the silver bullet to removing informal settlements and some of the dangers we're seeing in these informal settlements?
I think this government has done a commendable job, especially the announcement that the president made has brought in a lot of goodwill from different quarters. I know for sure that there are several, investors and even philanthropists who are interested, and even I think the World Bank is also interested in engaging with the private sector, the government, to do that, to see that affordability reaches, the bottom of the pyramid. So one of the key plus for the government is to make that announcement, to support the sector, whether as an enabler or a facilitator, or I'm not so sure the government can fund. I hear you say that the government could support through funding. I'm not so sure the government does that. I'm sure that the people will be looking at public-private partnerships. Maybe the government giving some free land. Some people are thinking of equity to do that. But for me, the announcement is good. And I'm just thinking that for those people, whether it's the World Bank or any other fund, African Development Bank, I'm not so sure, I'm just saying, just in case, they should not just look at affordability in terms of housing in the urban areas. They should look at affordability also in terms of, housing in the rural areas, because the rural people also need decent places to live. So in terms of funding, they could also support institutions with grassroots, presence. Like even the Saccos is talking about support to be able to develop, products, like even loan products, savings products, for these people to be able to, borrow from the financial sector. And I'm not saying just from the banking sector. It can be the Saccos, it can be the microfinance institutions, it can even be CBOs, who knows? So that, everybody is taken care of. So I'm looking at, a mix of effort. While we are looking at the rental sub-sector, which is huge in Kenya, we are also looking at the mortgage, we're looking at the micro mortgage, and we are looking at housing microfinance.
Absolutely.
So I'm thinking the government should think of various levels. Apart from policy making, we should also look at, if there's any funding, look at the whole range. The bottom of the pyramid is very wide. Look at the bottom of the pyramid, look at those people who are, in the middle range, and then look at the top range.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Prudence in terms of management of resources, because you know very well in this country, any project can metamorphosize into a scandal at any point. How does the government ensure prudence, particularly in the management of resources? Because even if it's an enabler, there's a cost from the part of government. How does the government ensure prudence in the management of these resources, even as it executes such an ambitious project?
I think, and we've seen realignments, especially around the same.
Yes.
It's all boiled down to management, proper management, who is going to management.
Yeah.
If you look at the realignment that has happened, especially moving housing,
Now to the Ministry of Transport,
to the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure, is aimed at, and I think it's informed by the same government, trying to see how do we make that, because affordability will come in just from implementation through using alternative building technology the government is pushing for. So putting it together so that we have one entity implementing this will enable the management of this. And you look at the environment has also not happened just on housing, or even on other big four, or the other three of the big four, whatever, just to make sure that all these things happen within one place, by just putting in the involvement of private sector. Private sector are always more prudent in terms of managing, and these projects are going to go through private-public partnership. So allowing also a better participation of private sector will also lead to trying to make sure they complete this project within timelines. And just people being responsible.
Yeah. And we hope ministers will not be buying the houses this time around. Anyway, we had another housing scandal. I think back in 2009, 2010, around
Yes,
there,
yes.
when Soita Shitanda was the Minister for Housing.
Yes.
We had a scandal on housing. We hope this time it won't happen. But we've been making a reference a lot to the changes that were done to the Finance Act 2016, obviously about the 400 units, low-cost homes annually, and the tax rate that was given to that. Number one, is there a take-up of that particular benefit given by government? And number two, if there is a take-up of the same, why can't we feel the trickle-down effect?
Again, this is a drop in the ocean.
It is.
Because of the capacity. How many people have capacity to do that? If you look at 400 units, even if you give an average of 5 million, how much is that? It's 400 times 5 million. That is a lot of money that very few people have capacity to achieve that. So again, it boils down to the same problem that the government is trying to solve. So if the government wants this to be actualized, they must go to where the problem is. And the problem is that low segment of the economy. And I still keep on insisting, whether it is food security, production that the government is talking about, universal health, and affordable houses, we must ask ourselves how we get into that. I don't want to delve into the universal health, because sometimes we think of curing, diseases and medication. It will go down to making people live a lifestyle that make them healthy, so that they can avoid the other problem. But when it comes to the housing, why do we need our people to be housed? Maybe that is the first question we need to ask ourselves. There's a question of security. There's a question of they can use that as a collateral to empower them, again, have some other income. And of course, the psychological aspect of it, because when you come from your house, And when we talk of affordability again, it may not necessarily mean ownership. It can also mean there are so many houses that are constructed, so much so that the cost of rent goes down. And when the cost of rent goes down, most people have a lot of disposable income. When you have a lot of disposable income, you are able to feed well, and you are able to, live a better life and reinvest the money. And the government gets income from such. Yeah. But you see, the government sometimes, when they are doing their project, it becomes very expensive. You've seen even very small projects done by the government, whether it's a bridge or a signboard. They'll have engineers, you have people coming to assess, they have this report. They have so many levels, and that all cumulatively adds into the cost of the house. They'll have engineers, you have people coming to assess, they have this report. They have so many levels, and that all cumulatively adds into the cost of the house. Why I want them to go to where the action is by reducing the bureaucracy, reducing the levels, so that the government initiative will not become a very, very expensive affair. Yeah. And they can only work with the players on the ground. That is the only time they are going to realize that dream. But many times, even when the government has has good intentions, the implementers may not have the same mindset. Do they understand the industry? Do they build the houses that they think people want? Or do they want to build houses and tell people to partake? Or they need to do something that people will really relate with? To do that, they must come to the level. They must climb down, not climb up. They climb down, as it were, to where this Wanjiko is. And this is the Wanjiko who can use the local materials to do a decent house. You look at the colonial history of our country. You go to Ukambani, you go to Western, you go to Central. When the settlers came, they used to use the local material for the houses that they were living in. You rarely would see them importing material. Yes. Is there any way of enhancing the materials that we are using and domesticating them to meet that demand in the region? If you go to Eldoret, for example, building a stone house is very expensive because they cannot mine stones there. So you may see bricks are there. Most people in Eldoret import stones from Darugo, from Vika. Yeah. So how do you make affordable housing in that area? When you go to Kitui, when you go to Machakos, the cost of house could be different because they can do bricks, they have sand, and they have other, even these decoration, those river stones that we use here for decoration are very precious. So you can do those houses by using local material. So we cannot say affordable house is, again, a national thing without going to the regional dictates of what is affordable in Region A and Region B.
In Region B. I see how 5 minutes and we are about to wind up this conversation. And it's something Chairman has alluded to. But I want to hear it from you. What will be the ripple effect of, if this project comes to fruition and we have achieved affordable housing, what will be the ripple effect, number one, on the economy, and number two, on the sector, particularly the real estate sector, because this is where the monies are considered to be? What will be the ripple effects?
It will be huge. When everybody is housed, housing is a very personal and a very emotive thing. We were talking about people in Kibera. They were built for houses, they went back to rent, and even though they are built for houses, they still build houses in the rural areas. That place you are talking about, yes.
Shimadavand.
Yeah. Housing is a very personal thing. Yes. A house is not a home, and you know that from our history. Yes. A house and a home is very different. So somebody with a house is a very happy person. So when you have people housed well, first of all, their health is good, their children are happy. Even when you go to the rural area and you see somebody change from a grass thatched house to maybe a brick house, you see when the health of the family changes, everybody is happy, they are empowered. So you have a very happy, nation. a nation that is housed, they are healthy, they are happy, they are eating well. So that would be one of the ripple effects. Yeah. Another one is that, people waste a lot of time moving from place to place, living in substandard houses. Yeah? Mm-hmm. For example, some people live in Thika, they work in Nairobi. You waste like 4 hours or even more a day, that traveling, commuting. Yeah. So in terms of everybody being housed in a place where they can afford and is maybe close by to their working place, you save a lot in terms of, even your productivity increases. So I think with affordable housing, the ripple effect is huge in terms of health, in terms of everything, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a glut already when it comes to the issues of, owning property or even having houses. But what I'm looking at is, and perhaps from the point of view is, if we achieve this agenda, does it mean then we can have these houses that are being sold at 18 million come down to 5, 6, 4, something like that?
To a larger extent, yes.
Good.
Once we get, what will happen is that you'll see a lot of price stabilization, which is already happening anyway in most of the markets, especially higher middle class markets in Nairobi. Rentals is stabilizing. Yeah. We'll see a lot of stabilizing prices. Other thing is to note that even as developers bring these houses of, let's say, what we see as expensive, it is brought about by expensive land. It's more input that comes in. It's not that they just add money on top of it. It's like a normal good. There's that supply and demand, and there's the issue of inputs coming in. Another thing we'll see is perhaps the fall of the Juakali contractor or Juakali developer, the person who goes to some of these places, do 4 rooms without providing amenities. Yeah. So with the government affordability, these non-institutionalized developers will have to go. And it will be more also because they also do substandard.
200 houses sharing one toilet.
Or maybe they do substandard things that eventually collapse.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for your last word, I want you to deal with this constant question that keeps coming in my SMS line, and that is, what is the distinction between affordable housing and low-cost housing? Very quickly.
Affordable housing, as I said, universally is any housing that is being able to be afforded by a median income of a society, based on an affordable index rated by a local government or the national government. Low-cost housing it might be more targeted to the very low, and even in our policies, you'll see they've defined it has to be 2 habitable rooms, it has to be about 35 to 40 meters square. They've really clarified what it should come with, perhaps generally, if you calculate the way they're going, it should be around 2 million. Okay. Or 2 million and below in terms of cost. Right. Affordable housing is more on what can that population or a specific target market you're looking at be able to afford in terms of owning and in terms of renting. And that's why you see government saying we want to bring affordable housing that people will use what they're paying as rent now to be able to pay for a mortgage or something. Does not necessarily mean affordable housing is cheap.
All right. Yeah. I see we already passed the count, so I'll give you 30 seconds to make your final remarks on that camera, your last word, right? On the camera. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. My last statement is that we have tended to ignore the majority of our population when we talk about affordability. And I hope people will be thinking about those people in the rural areas when talking about affordability. Yeah. What they can afford based on their incomes, what they prefer, and a decent place to live.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the government should also take that into account.
The rural areas.
Yeah.
Chairman, your camera was which? This one, yes.
I think the whole idea of the government coming up with these 4 pillars is laudable. But the only thing that we need now to focus on is the actualization of that phenomenal idea. And we can only do that by working with us, working with the players, we feel sometimes very lonely and alone in this. You are left alone to struggle with your members and with the clients. But the government can come and partner with us. And when we mean us, we are saying the providers of these affordable houses.
Yeah.
We feel there is a very huge gap to be covered. But that can only happen if all of us join hands together. The government supports, the county government supports, and people are empowered as a consumer at the tail end of ownership to get these houses. And they can only do that by having very well elaborate schemes of financing them long term, so that at 20, at 30, you can own a house and pay over 10, 15 years. So that now, whatever goes to the mortgage is so much reduced. But in the current status, it still remain a mirage. So it's upon the government now to take up the mantle and make sure that they work with the players like Urithi in the industry.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much, Ruth. And thank you, Denge, for coming to studio. Ruth has never had any TV appearance, so today was her first. And I think you have oriented you very well, right? You can do more.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And of course, thank you very much for watching back at home. And good thanks to Rose Walimu, who is in charge of our online presence here at KBC, and Lovin Nashipai, who have been tweeting different locations. Thank you very much for watching. God bless you. Have yourself a good night. But of course, obviously, think about financial prudence. And like Chairman says, Saccos are the way to go. Good night. God bless.